Hey there, Mrs. Williams here, and this is question 4.5 or point 57. It says a buyer plans to sell a certain group of shirts in his store for $26 each. He needs to achieve a 38% markup over his cost. What should he pay his supplier per shirt in order to meet his goal? So we're going to answer the question in a sentence and say to achieve a 38% markup over his cost, a buyer should pay blank dollars per shirt to the supplier. This question is a little tricky, pretty tricky. It's one of the harder ones, I think. If you don't think so, thumbs up, that's awesome. But in case you're having trouble with this, what we want to do is just be really careful about what the $26 means. This is the final price of the shirt. This is what the buyer is going to sell the shirt for in his store. So that means that $26 is made up of the cost to the supplier, what he bought the shirt for, those P's, plus the markup amount. So be careful not to take 38% of the $26. That's actually not what we're going to take the percent of. What he would do, because it's a 38% markup over his cost, what you would do if you were the buyer is you would find, whatever the cost was. If it was $10 for the shirt, the 38% is going to apply to that $10, or it's going to apply to the cost of the shirt. So it doesn't apply to the 26. The 26 is what we end up with, if you go into the store to buy it. But that's not, the 38% is a markup over his cost. So the 38% is a percentage of the cost. So we don't know either of these yet. That's why this one's a little tricky. But we can think of it this way. Okay, we know the question is, what should he pay his supplier per shirt? Well, that's the cost to the supplier. So we're going to call this X. So we can say we know $26 is going to be X plus the amount of the increase. If we word it like the formula that we've used over and over again in this chapter, the markup amount is really the amount of your increase. Okay, so see how we're trying to figure out, okay, how could we use this formula to help us out? All right. And so what we need to do in order to be able to, because what we want to put here is the amount of increase or decrease. So this is, in this case, it's going to be the amount of the increase. Well, how do we represent that with what we have up here? Well, what we can do is we can put the amount of the increase on one side of this equation and get everything else on the other side. And that tells us, well, whatever the amount of the increase is equal to, we can put it in for the numerator here. So what we want to do is we want to subtract X from both sides. And we're going to say the amount of the increase is really 26 minus X. So that's what we're going to put in the numerator in the percent increase decrease formula to help us out. What was the original amount? So be careful. Remember, the original amount of the shirt, we're thinking of that in this problem as the cost to the supplier. That's our X. So be careful not to think of it as 26. 26 is like your final amount. That's not where we started, though. We started with X. We actually don't know what that is yet. Okay, and we do know our percent of increase. That's the 38. So we do know we want it to increase by 38% above the original cost. And now we have our formula set up. This is a 6 right there. And again, here it's a little bit more challenging to solve this one than some of those that we've had in this chapter. You're still going to go about it by cross-multiplying. We're going to say 100 times this entire numerator, 26 minus X, equals 38X. Then the 100 is not just multiplied by the 26, but also by the x. So remember the distributive property. We want to multiply the 100 by the 26 and by the x. And then we are looking a little more, it's gotten a lot simpler than what we started with here. We want to get all the x's to one side. So we're going to add 100x to both sides. And so on the left, we just end up with the 2600. On the right, if we add 100x to 38x, we have 138 x's altogether. And then, remember, our goal always with algebra is to get x by itself, so we need to get rid of the 138 by dividing, in this case, because it's being multiplied by the x. And that gives us 18.840. And I know that's as far as I need to go, because if I look back at what, first of all, remember, what does x mean? X represents the cost to the supplier. And the little blank here will help you out too. We know this needs to be in dollar amount, but that does make sense with what we called x, because x is a cost, which should be in a dollar amount. And it also says round to the nearest cent. And so I know that if I have 3 place values, then I have enough to round to the nearest hundredth, and so this would stay at a 4. But to give some context to what this means, I could add a dollar sign there. It'd be $18.84 is what I would want to pay the supplier if I were the buyer. And then I'd be able to sell it for $26.